If you are stuck trying to climb on ADC this season, look, we honestly get it. It can feel impossible, you have barely any agency, a complete reliance on your support during the lane phase, and then even though you now get extra gold from your role quest and a whole entire extra item slot, the level 20 top laner or the Fed Assassin just one-shots you in the mid to late game anyway. Ain't that the truth? There is a reason streamers and content creators keep doing challenges to see if they can climb on ADC, as everyone and their brother knows it is the hardest role to climb on, which is why today we're going to be giving you some easy and most importantly, practical tips you can start applying in your games to truly help you climb. That above all else will work regardless of your support or your team, as we are super excited to announce our brand new Season 16 ADC Essentials course is finally here. A 4-part course designed to walk you through every stage of the game, from navigating the lane phase by learning how to win every trade, the must-know Season 16 timers that give huge advantages in lane, and the exact rules you need to be following for when to fight and when to recall too. There's even an entire chapter dedicated to teaching you how to play with every single support and bot lane matchup possible, from melee engaged supports to enchanters, and even that Morgana support that only exists to press W on the wave, as you're going to learn everything you need to survive the lane phase, even with a bad support. And if that wasn't enough already, we also cover the macro decisions that most ADCs get completely wrong, to the mistakes that 99% of players make around objectives that literally cost them the game, as we're going to teach you everything you need to master the mid game too. Before then, finally covering the art of team fighting and the tips and tricks challenger ADCs abuse to always deal the highest damage possible, from how to position, how to manage and track cooldowns, and even some must-know settings and mechanics. Now, if you're serious about climbing this season, this is going to be your course. There is a reason it has countless 5-star reviews already. Check it out today completely risk-free by using the link or the pinned comment in the description below, as if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service, you're going to get every penny back. But back to the video. So one of the biggest changes to Season 16 was, of course, the game now starting a whole lot faster, and because of this, all those level 1 shenanigans and invades, well, they're basically a thing of the past. However, still in low elo games, it does feel like every other replay that we watch, bot lane ends up being thrown to somebody cheesing the lane bush at level 1 now. But there is such a simple solution to this, as in every high elo game, the exact same thing happens. Either the ADC or the support rushes to the lane and wards this middle bush here, and this just completely removes your opponent ever having the possibility to cheese you. So with that quick PSA out of the way, Ashe here is seemingly about to make that exact same mistake. She walks up and gets hooked by Blitz. Now, pause right here though. For the majority of ADC players, this is a complete nightmare of a scenario. You're either going to need to blow flash to preserve some health, or you're walking it out and ending up so low that the lane is practically over before you've even hit a minion. Only not exactly, as Blitz and Varus here just made the #1 mistake in bot lane, and Ashe, well, she knows it. One of the main reasons playing lane on ADC is so difficult is the ridiculous amount of potential matchups that you can encounter. Now, in the other lanes, there's a handful of meta picks, and if you're only playing a few of the champions, you're really going to begin to learn the matchups really quick. When you're going to win an all-in, when you should or you shouldn't trade, that kind of stuff, it all comes naturally. But in bot lane, there's a ton of different marksmen, there's a ton of different mages, and even random non-meta picks too, and that's without even mentioning supports. Between engaged supports, enchanters, poke mages, everything in between, it's kind of literally impossible to know what to do. And the craziest part is that even if you do somehow end up in a matchup that you're going to be familiar with, the lane can still play out completely different depending on how your support likes to play. One game you might have a super aggressive Lulu that's constantly trading and fighting and setting you up. In the next one, you might get a Lulu that just sits behind you and shields you on cooldown. So here's the good news though. No matter the matchup, there is a super simple and reliable way to create a game plan, and that's playing around the Keystone runes that you and the enemy ADC have selected. There's 7 potential Keystones that you see in bot lane. There's Conqueror, Lethal Tempo, PTA, Fleet Footwork, Arcane Comet, and to a lesser extent Dark Harvest and Hail of Blades. And these can all be put on a scale and grouped into 3 distinct categories that'll make playing out your lane phase a whole lot easier. So there's the Ramp Up runes, which are Lethal Tempo and Conqueror, the Burst runes, which are Press the Attack and Hail of Blades, and then the One-Tap runes, Fleet, Comet, and Dark Harvest. So what's key to remember is that especially in the early levels, runes make up the majority of a bot laner's strength. If you have either of the Ramp Up runes, you're going to be heavily favored in fights that that go on longer thanks to your rune choice, which means you're going to typically want to preserve HP as much as possible and look for an extended fight or an all-in. If you have either of the burst runes, a general game plan you should have is to take a quick trade, proc your rune for a burst of damage, and just get out and repeat this until you can actually finish them off. For example, if you have two ADCs, one with PTA and one with lethal tempo, the one with PTA is going to at first look like they're winning the fight, but then lethal tempo. Once it ramps up, it's going to start to take over and always win out. And the lower that rune is on the scale, the more apparent this is going to become. So right at the bottom of that scale is the one-tap runes, where you're either going for one auto trades in the case of Fleet, or look to just poke with abilities if you have Comet to slowly wear them down, avoiding all-ins at all costs until you're certain that they are already low enough for you to finish them off. So now that we know that, let's go back to the Ashe clip. She gets hooked level 1, loses a chunk of health immediately, but despite the fact the majority of players would panic here, look at the runes. This is Comet Varus, and Ashe has lethal tempo. So the moment this hook lands, it's not Ashe that's in trouble, it's actually Varus, as she runs them both down, forces the flash, and both have to end up basing. And this is Masters Elo, by the way, and players are still not respecting the power of rune traits. And even after eventually playing out the early lane phase, Ashe manages to get a good base with exactly 1200 gold in her pocket. And as she's building towards Kraken, as her first purchase is Hearthbound Axe. All in all, a pretty good buy with 0 wasted gold, or so you in the majority of ADCs would think. But Challenger players know this is a huge mistake. In League, not every item component is built equal. There's certain components like Hearthbound Axe, Recurve Bow, and Scout Slingshot that are all incredibly gold inefficient. Hearthbound Axe is exactly 1200 gold and builds out of 2 longswords, a dagger, and 250 gold, and gives the same value in stats as 2 longswords and 2 daggers. So basically all it's achieving is saving you inventory slots. Compare that to something like Lost Chapter, which is the same amount of gold, yet 133% gold efficient without even including the completely broken passive. So now let's say Ashe purchased 3 longswords and a refillable. She would have spent the exact same gold. That's 30 AD in sustain compared to 20 AD and 20 attack speed. But even without thinking about the extra healing, that extra longsword is doing way more for you in lane than a dagger ever will. Because think about how lane actually plays out. You're not standing still autoing somebody for 5 seconds straight. You're walking up, taking a trade of 1, maybe 2 autos and ability at a time, and then you're backing off. Attack damage makes every one of those autos hit harder and boost the damage from your abilities too. Attack speed, while obviously great for scaling, only matters if fights go long enough for you to get those extra autos off. And in the early lane phase, this is very, very rare. Now yes, there are definitely some exceptions to this though, like Hogmaw and Yunara that do get value from the on-hit from items like Recurve Bow. But this is also why you always want to avoid buying a crit cloak early into the game, as you're essentially just wasting 600 gold in doing so. Now the most ubiquitous early purchase is of course the 1300 gold required for BF Sword, at least for champions that are rushing either Stormrazor or Yuntal. But outside of that, if you base with less than 1300 gold or are not building a BF Sword item, what you should be looking to do is something called component maxing. This is prioritizing high value components to get the most lane value immediately. This is partly the reason why Yuntal and Stormrazor are becoming less and less popular as time goes on, as the build path, if you're unable to reach that 1300 gold, is very, very bad, while the majority of other popular first items provide a lot more flexibility in your purchases for the early lane phase, regardless of your goal. But how you should approach spending your gold is actually really simple. First, prioritize as many longswords as go into your first completed item. Then, look to items like coal, which is always very valuable, boots, and refillable, with daggers being the lowest priority. And for almost all the champions, there's a ton of flexibility in how you do this depending on how much gold you have on your first base. So let's say you're playing Jinx. There's actually 3 different first items you can rush with fairly similar win rates: Hex Optics, Yuntal, or Kraken. So if you base on 875 gold, buy a pickaxe and go Hex Optics. If you base on 1300 gold, buy a BF Sword and go Yuntal. But in between that, there's a few other rate points to consider using this logic that either push you towards one of the 3 items or keep your build path flexible while still giving you the most value out of your early gold. And although this does seem minor at first, I get that. It's something that you have complete control over and can gain you very meaningful advantages in lane. So without a doubt, definitely worth thinking about. And that said, this single tip is honestly an entire video in itself when you start to factor in other champions, and especially those that build either Trinity Force or Lethality. So if you want to learn more about this and how to abuse it, be sure to sure to check out our ADC Essentials course using the link in the description below. Anyway, up next, we have a bait that practically every single ADC is falling for this season, something that is so easy to fix, yet still, players are making the same mistake every single game. And to show you what that is, let's look at this, let's just say, interesting clip from an Emerald game. So far, Senna and Lux have been abusing their early range advantage to set themselves up a pretty good health lead. But then, every ADC's absolute worst nightmare happens. Pantheon jumps over the wall, tries to assassinate the brand, realizes he doesn't have enough damage, panics, and eats the wrong way, handing a free kill over. However, it only gets worse than this, as right after, Lux walks back into turret range, takes an empowered turret shot, and feeds over another kill. Now listen, I know for a fact that me, you, and everyone else has been Senna in this situation. You play really, really well, only to have your support or your jungle just completely int your lane. Now, fortunately for her, though, it really must just be her lucky day or something, man. As immediately after, Kai'Sa and Brand just int right back into her and hand over the double. But what if I told you none of what you just saw is even the worst thing that happens in this clip? And nothing compares to the mistake Senna is about to make. Everybody knows the #1 goal once you kill your opponents is to push the wave, crash it into turret, and base as fast as possible, which Senna does do a pretty good job doing at first. But then, here's where it all goes wrong. That juicy turret plate. Oh, so satisfying. The super satisfying crystalline overgrowth coupled with that oh so easy to take first plate. Only it's not so easy, and she ends up spending another 5 autos to actually get it. At which point, guess who's back in lane? Kai'Sa. And what does Kai'Sa do? Well, what every ADC should be looking to do when they return to lane. Stopping your opponent's base. This can, in many cases, instantly win you the lane, exactly like we see here, where even despite the plethora of mistakes we just witnessed, Senna, even though she's up in gold and kills and had the lane in the bag, is now stuck in lane with all of her gold on 20% health, with her only options being to just walk all the way back to get her recall off and lose multiple waves of gold and experience, negating that lead entirely. Or just end up stuck in lane getting perma-shoved into turret while she bleeds gold, minions, and turret plates. Either way, this one mistake of not just basing after pushing the wave just cost Senna the early lane. So, something to always keep in mind is that getting back to lane now with home guards only takes around 16 seconds, which is double the amount of time it takes to recall. Meaning if your opponent's base are about to respawn, you have 8 seconds to start your recall before they get back to lane, which is typically just enough time to push the lane and nothing more. And on the topic of ruining the payoff, in every role, for every single matchup, wave control is without a doubt one of the most important skills to master. It's the most consistent way to build advantages in lane, and if you're an ADC player, you've probably watched a dozen guides telling you when to freeze, when to slow push, when to fast push, all the usual stuff. But here's what none of these guides are telling you. As an ADC, most of your wave control shouldn't be about you. It should instead be about enabling your support. One of the downsides everybody has with ADC as a role is that the support typically has more agency in the 2v2, at least in the early game, which is why you, as the ADC, should be setting up the wave in the proper place. But it's then primarily going to be up to your support to use that to their advantage. Now we see this time and time again where ADCs will get an early lead or be much stronger in the 2v2. Yet rather than build on that advantage to completely take over the game, use it to instead permanently push in wave after wave and pin their opponents under turret. Now, while this can definitely be good in some cases, like this game here, where Caitlyn and Vel'Koz are permanently pushing to harass under turret, which when you have a poke support or 2 long-range champions makes it incredibly hard for your opponent to CS, while also making it nearly impossible to avoid poke, as they won't have any minions to hide behind. But if you have an engaged support, or are a short to mid-range ADC, this is actually the worst thing that you can do, as all you're doing is letting your opponents freely farm under turret. Sure, you have priority, at least depending on who you ask anyway. But in lower elos, all that means is you're sitting there vulnerable and waiting to be ganked so you can throw your lead entirely. In these situations, you ideally always want to have the wave be on your side of the lane as much as possible, either pushing into you or freezing it just outside your own turret to force your opponents to move up. And how you do this is by setting up what's known as a rebound. How these work is that whenever you crash a wave on your opponent's turret, unless they're able to clear it before the reinforcing wave arrives, their wave is going to get stuck on it. Minions will build up and then begin pushing back to you, giving your support multiple windows to engage as the wave begins to push up the lane. Now, like most things that rely on your support, this obviously will not always work out, but the likelihood that your support does end up finding a good play goes up dramatically if you understand the correct wave techniques to use in order to enable them. And this is not the only way to build on your lead in the lane phase. One slightly more advanced trick is to do something called pulling the wave. Now, this is something you really only ever see in high elo, but it's insanely effective and stupidly easy to pull off. Take this game here. We have Lucian Milio up against Nami Sivir. Lucian and Milio were able to get a slight advantage early and are much stronger in the 2v2. The only issue is that, like we just covered, Lucian is short range, so can't really harass under turret, and can't create a rebound, as Sivir can clear the wave too fast. So look what he does. He uses his advantage to walk into the wave, and then lets it hit him. Then, as his own wave comes in, he moves out of the way. And what this does is it causes your minions to group up and all focus the melee minion, causing the wave to push into Lucian, at which point Sivir is then forced to leave the safety of her turret to farm, and Lucian can capitalize with the short trades he's looking for to take advantage of his PTA, not only denying minions, but also setting himself up to have actual kill pressure. And he just keeps doing this every single wave. This is, without a doubt, 100% something every ADC needs to be abusing this season, and yet almost nobody is. And it's not only good for these specific situations that we just talked about either. Earlier we mentioned how pushing quickly and setting up a good recall is crucial, but there's often going to be times like this here, where your opponent's base first, but you know for a fact that you're not going to be able to push the next wave fast enough to crash it. Well, abuse this trick. Not only can you still get your base off, but you're going to be denying your opponent farm just as if you push the wave, and have the wave be pushing into you once you return. But the best part is that once you know this trick, you can even start doing it from level 1 in some niche cases. Watch this. Alistar is one of the weakest level 1 supports in the game, having nothing other than vibes to offer until he gets his combo. So Aphelios and Sona completely zone them off and then pull off this trick, meaning now not only are they getting zoned, but worst of all, the wave's pushing away from them. And hey, if you found this guide helpful, this is only the tip of the iceberg. Our brand new Season 16 Essentials course breaks down every single stage of the game, from the early lane phase where you're going to learn about everything from wave management to level and item advantages, and to ensure you always win lane regardless of your support. We have an entire chapter dedicated to teaching you exactly how to play with every kind of support, including some must-know tips on how to deal with the bad ones too, to mastering the mid-game as well, teaching you all about the secret macro decisions challenger ADCs are abusing this season to get the most out of RollQuest, before finally giving you all of the hidden tech that you need to start teamfighting and dealing damage like a challenger ADC in the late game, including some must-know mechanics and settings that you cannot be playing without this season. Try it out completely risk-free today using the link in the description or pinned comment below, and if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service, you're going to get every penny back, no questions asked. For now though, thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.